in
Thank
real
you.
clothes.
Am I all right? I'll move back away a little bit. All right, let me fire this thing up here and away we go. Excellent. Well, welcome to another great week of Account-Based Fridays. We've got a special guest today, the COO of Path Factory, Helen Baptiste. Really jazzed to hear a number of her statistics and findings and research around content, buying committees, and how it's shifting. Each week we start with a poll, and in a moment we'll ask for Helen's perspective on this as well. But this week's poll, we asked about a question of the content in terms of how it was being consumed. And, it's a simple poll. I had 4 choices here. So I tried to break it out across different aspects of video and text and generational aspects to see if there was a difference. And to my surprise, now I'm a little bit older, so I fall into that Gen X and boom category. But to my surprise, I was really surprised that the millennial/Gen Z were not higher on the video side, given TikTok and the explosion of that platform, and that they actually preferred to get more of their content through text. So I saw that as the biggest difference here, and it was the biggest surprise to me. Megan, I don't know, what was your perspective on this one?
I thought the same thing. I was shocked video wasn't higher for the Gen Z millennial one. I'm a text person myself, so I picked the Gen X text one. I like to read. And I hate putting on headphones, but I know that I am the absolute minority. So not surprised to see, video come up higher, but I was definitely shocked by the millennial one. That doesn't, I'm finding that video gets so much more attention that it just didn't sort of make sense to me. So I wonder, maybe that's a small sample size thing, but I can't think of anybody better to ask perhaps to weigh in on that than our wonderful guest, Helen. Helen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I find that really interesting. I wonder if it's because this is LinkedIn specific, where content snippets are usually, let's take Twitter, for example, 240 characters or whatever it is, right? And so you can get the nugget that you need in that soundbite that's being posted. And I see, some of my team looking at how do we make it really snappy, right? Like hook the person in the first couple of sentences. And maybe that's what's happening here. I wouldn't say that that's the case in all content. What we're actually seeing is a change in the types of content that are being produced and consumed across all of our customers. And every year we kind of do a benchmark of what people are doing in our platform, and we publish a content engagement report, and we've just done it specifically for some verticals, so cyber, IT, manufacturing, and there are nuances within that construct as well. So in 2021, we saw more visitors than ever before to digital content than in totality, but also comparatively in a sample size. There's more visitors coming, and they're spending more time and repeat visits as well. So people are really doing what Brent Adamson from Gartner said, which is let the buyer buy, right? The dark social or your content is being consumed by people and you don't even know about it. And I think that that's a missed opportunity for a lot of companies where the buying committee is forming and you don't even know it. And the buying committee is different by segment or by customer or opportunity. So how do you get your arms wrapped around what topics your sales rep should even talk about is part of the mission that we're on, is really helping marketers to understand what content they have to create, to serve up, what's performing based on who's engaging with it, whether that's DG, traditional DG, customer marketing, partner marketing, or ABM. And then on the other side of it is really understanding what topics and messaging that salesperson should actually talk about when they actually get a live one on the line, right? Or even to entice them to engage even further. So Path Factory's legacy has always been helping people understand content and how it's performing for you. And we've evolved a little bit in terms of AI and machine learning, and we're seeing even more profound performance when we're serving up recommendations for content as well, versus the marketer curating what they think the customer journey should be, versus letting that buyer explore in the way that they want to explore. So if you think about Amazon, right? I just bought some sunscreen because I'm going on vacation soon. They're serving up sun hats now. And so they understand the attributes of what I've bought, that it is, it's an SPF and therefore it's sun. Therefore, what's the related article or the related topic that they should be serving up? And that's the kind of AI that we're talking about, is topics and trending and where you're coming from and those kinds of things. So it's the content journey or the customer journey is changing, and you better get your arms wrapped around it from a content perspective, is what I would say.
What are some of the most important shifts you've seen over the last year in terms of how people are interacting with content? What are some of those key trends?
Yeah, so we use a word called binging, and binging is, it is, you Netflix binge, right? And binging is you go on to the next show or the next piece of content. And so we're seeing more bingers coming back and a lot more unknown visitors coming back. So we have an integration with both 6 Sense and Demand Base. So if you are a customer of Demand Base, you can bring your API key with you and use that data. We OEM 6 Sense IP to account lookup information. And so we are always matching for accounts as well as individuals, whether they're known or unknown, right? And so this idea that the buying committee is really growing is one thing that I really want to highlight. So the average number of known visitors at visiting content across all of our customers decreased by more than 27% last year. The number of unknown visitors obviously increased conversely, right? But the number of accounts that have 10 plus visitors and 5 of them known was an increase of almost 87%. So wow. When you think about that, that means that the buying committee is really doing their homework, and you don't know where that buying committee is or who they are. And so you better be able to serve up content that's relevant to what they're looking for, right? And I'll use an example for us. I was telling John, right? We sell to 3 segments: SMB, mid-market, and enterprise. And in our SMB business, we see, 10 marketers or 10 people in the buying committee. And sometimes that's, procurement and legal, because we don't know who they are, but eventually we get their name when they sign the paperwork. And so they become a contact in the database and we connect them back, right? But the buying committee is increasing even in SMB, right? The smaller marketing teams are having more people involved in the buying committee because budgets are tight, because what's happening out in the world, right? On one of our enterprise deals, we have 200 people or more in a buying committee for an existing customer where we're just expanding. And what's happening is we're seeing that buying committee expand in the unknown later stages of the opportunity. And to Brent Addison, the buying committee forms normally over time, and that's true. And what we're seeing is it's people looking for specific case studies or lower funnel documentation that we've created to make sure that they're making the right buying decision. And that's, it's kind of profound when you can really know what kind of content should I serve up to whom and when, or you can let the machine do that for you, depending on where they're coming in on the opportunity as well.
I'm curious, when you mentioned kind of the change in the dynamic of the buyer committee, and thinking through the last 3 years have been really transformational here with obviously the global pandemic, and you kind of had the before pandemic. In some parts of the globe, you've got the in pandemic, and then some parts of the globe now transitioning, hopefully, out of the pandemic. Have you seen any trends there in terms of either the buying committee consumption of content or content in different segments there? And I guess, more recently, have you seen any different trends than maybe just a few months ago?
Yeah, so this is comparative to 2020, right? So at the beginning of COVID, we did a benchmark then, and then we did one at the end of 21 as well. And so we're seeing that buying committee has really been expanded. And it's global teams. It's not just, North American teams buying from a North American headquarter. It's, lots of people have marketers in Europe or in Asia. And so how do you enable them to make the buying decisions or, help you make the right choices for your organization on whatever software it is that you're selling? And it's not only software, it's services too. So we have some services companies in there as well, but we're seeing longer binger sessions, right? 4 times the length of a bouncer. So they're spending 4 times more time with the content that you're serving up, if you can hook them to the next piece, right? Or if you can get them to come back to the session that you've already spent on there, and they're spending 9.4 times longer than bouncers. So they're coming more frequently. They're staying longer, they're coming back more frequently, if you can hook them. And the key is reducing that friction between sending out your email with one piece of content in it or asking them to fill a form and then download, and then it's a dead end, right? That's the goal, is to remove the friction and serve up content when that person wants to consume it. Right person, right content, right time, right channel.
What do you see set apart companies who do a good job of setting a content agenda and really having the content that because a lot of these things are prefaced with, if you get people to pay attention, what sets apart those teams that do a better job of that?
I think part of it is really understanding what content is driving that engagement so that you can drive your strategy. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg. You have to start somewhere, and you have to kind of like the infinity signal kind of comes to mind, right? Understanding what topics and keywords are important in your content, making sure your content is compliant for SEO and accessibility for WCAG standards, right? That is, and that you have alt images for social finding, right? Because that's the way people find things in social. So having an understanding of how good your content actually is that you have, and what topics and formats and channels are actually performing and driving, your pipeline as much as they are. Those are kinds of the questions that we answer, and we try to help our customers do that and apply the learnings of the content topics to their content strategy. I mean, we eat our own. I don't want to say dog food, right? Because that's not the right thing to say, but we drink our own beer, our own champagne. And so we're constantly looking at what kinds of content, what topics, what channel, what campaign really drives business for us. I know, for example, for enterprise, it's top of funnel thought leadership that I have to serve mid stage as opposed to top all the time. For enterprise customers, because they're looking to be the leader, but they have a longer way to change, right? So they're working their way down the funnel with us to really understand, how does this going to affect my job, and how can I really, make a difference for myself and my career, versus just for the business.
And maybe just picking up on that a little bit and thinking about, Wendy, for example, as a CMO. You've got content that's really, really valuable, but then at the CMO level, how do you, any advice on reporting of the impact of content? Because sometimes I think of content as kind of an input into the process of, hey, this is what marketing has sourced in terms of revenue, and content's a part of that. Yet we know it's really, really valuable right now because content is everything. Do you have any advice for CMOs that might be trying to measure the impact or the effectiveness and what that would bubble up to at the exec level?
Wendy, you want me to answer, or do you want Wendy to answer? Wendy, go ahead and answer that question.
No, Helen, he's telling you to give me some good advice. I could use the good advice. So you give it.
I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is, I gave that Amazon example earlier, is that they have a really good understanding of the attributes, right? Like, so I have a can of Pepsi Zero here, and it's got a nutrition fact panel on it. And the attributes of what's inside that content are known. And most marketers don't have that in terms of what are the attributes, what are the topics that I have in here? How long is this going to read? yeah, we have a word count, but like what level reads at what speed, and how far do people scroll on a PDF white paper, those kinds of things, right? So what should I create next? And so that's the stuff that we're doing, is we're really breaking it down into the attributes of that content. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is that we're looking at, marketers in our platform tag their content with what tags they think are on the attributes of that content. And what we're going to start to do very shortly is show marketers that there are other topics of interest contained in this, and what are the nearest neighbors of content that you might want to curate on those specific topics, if those ones are the ones that are performing for you. It's how we built our recommendation engine. We skip straight to recommendation, and we've got all this data underneath, which I think is fascinating, and surfacing that up for marketers will be interesting to see. So, to me, marketers, the CMO needs to understand what topics your buyers are consuming, not the ones that the marketer thought they were tagging, but the real ones that they're taking. What is the actual content journey or the customer journey before they identify to known? And then how do you use that from an ABX perspective, both from a marketing side, but also a sales side, is where do you go where your customers are, or your prospects are, to be able to grow your pipeline and win more business.
I think, Helen, not only marketers need to know or want to know, but the C-suite wants to know. I just had my CEO ask in a meeting the other day, what content is bringing these leads in? What is working? What's the message? What's the story? He actually cares, because he wants to see that carried across, our BDR efforts, our sales efforts, to really focus on those same messages that are converting and winning.
Yeah. And look, I'm fortunate. I own the complete customer lifecycle at Path Factory, right? Which is, I own top of funnel marketing, brand awareness, through to the moment somebody churns off the account, off our business, and hopefully not too many of those do. But the messaging and the content construct is purposefully built to be multi-purpose across the customer journey, right? Because expansion is important in certain accounts, because we have BDRs who are relatively junior and don't understand what messaging is versus copy, right? Like, those are the kinds of things that you have to accommodate for. So I think the other thing that's going to happen relatively quickly is you'll see a different kind of sales play coming as well, where marketers can control the story, but enable sales to serve up experiences in ways that are templated, that come with the recommended content based on what that has been consumed, and do it right in the environments that they're already playing in. So whether that's CRM or sales, I always forget what category sales, loft, and outreach are in. So forgive me for those people who are listening. But where sales is playing, right, or CS is playing as well, is how do I make sure that I'm enabling customers with the right content? We're thinking about putting our knowledge base into our recommendation engine so that we can serve up content to customers as they're visiting their own, Path Factory experiences from us as part of our customer success experience as well.
Yeah. Well, it might be an interesting place to close. You mentioned, Helen, you've got kind of a unique role.
Yeah.
And super interesting that you own that entire customer experience. Can you share a little bit about how that role developed over time, and what some of your top goals are, kind of as you think about this year?
Yeah. Look, my goal is always to be customer centric, first and foremost. I was a buyer of Path Factory in a prior job, and so I knew that there was a product market fit issue. And one of the first things I did was change pricing for SMB, and constantly out in the market talking to people. Wendy's a trusted friend and ally here. There's a bunch of other people we have relationships with that we work with and or have customers provide feedbacks. That's terrible English. But the role as it evolved was, it really is about being customer centric, making a predictable pipeline. I mean, those are the words that everybody uses. But also making sure that I have resume making moments for people that work with me at Path Factory. And what that means is that I am constantly thinking about the organizational design to evolve for both the market need, but also the needs of the people that are on my team. And then also for, the due diligence pipeline that always happens. And nobody ever really talks about that pipeline. And I've had a couple conversations with other people this week who've said, oh, I want to be a CRO, or I want to be chief operating officer like you, Helen. And I don't ever think about one pipeline. I'm constantly thinking about two pipelines, one for the CEO for investor purposes, and the other for, the business, so that we can go to investors and either have an exit or raise money or whatever it is. And that process for me is about making sure that I have the right people in the right seats with the right documentation of the plays, of the policies, of the procedures, so that when due diligence is happening and the investor says, oh, I'd like to see, I have it in a repository that I can then put it in a data room, right? So that's the other side of the job that I do, is preparing the organization for readiness for investors.
Yeah, I love
it's
that.
A different role.
Yeah, it is. But I think you're bringing up an important point, though, which is if you are a revenue leader in whatever role you're in, you really do have those two audiences to serve, right? You've got sort of future you who's going to be trying to look for some kind of an exit, or future leadership, right? That's looking for that exit, and the investors that you need to support, as well as really not ever losing sight of that customer. And I love that you led with, it's important to always be customer centric.
Yeah.
What is your recommendation for marketing leaders who want to move into a role like yours? Skills that you see them need to acquire, or that you yourself have had to acquire to get to where you are?
Yeah, I think I've just come off of an International Women's Day session about the imposter syndrome with my team, and we've had some external customers and friends of the family talk to us. And I think the one thing that I'm grooming somebody to take over my job right now. Not that I'm leaving, but one day I'd like to. And the one thing that I would say is that you have to have some sales experience. Whether you have BDRs underneath you or not, you do have to understand the sales motion, and you have to understand how to overcome those objections, and you have to understand how to forecast the pipe, right? And I think that is the key lesson that I had, was that I was a salesperson first. And I can bring that to the table. I worked in an agency, and I know, Megan, you and I have crossed paths with Carlson Marketing and Peppers and Rogers and things like that. But I had that customer experience side, which was how do you manage relationships to expand them? And then I had this marketing side, which was my customers were marketing, right? I was marketing for those people. And so I think if you can round yourself out by getting some sales experience, even if it's, shadowing a sales rep, for a period of time while you're doing your job, it means investing in yourself to get to where you want to go as well. Don't be afraid to carry the bag, is what I would say to you. And a lot of people in marketing are afraid to carry the bag because the bag is scary, because it's the first thing that gets noticed, right? When the board comes in and you say you've missed your numbers, it's like, who's responsible for that? The person carrying the bag, right? So don't be afraid to carry the bag, is what I would say.
I love that advice. I couldn't agree more. I think it's hugely important. I once had a seller say to me, you need to understand that I am always on a 30-day performance plan.
You are like, are you doing the activities to make sure your pipeline's not empty at the top? Are you doing the activities at the bottom to make sure it's moving forward to close? Are you building the buying committee? Like, there's a lot of things that they do that we don't really think about, that just look like, a duck in water, or they're out socializing at an event, or, having beers or lunch, or in the old days. But the motion has changed since COVID. And I think it's more difficult, but enabling them with the right kind of content to wrap it all back together, right, is the key. And understanding the buying committee and enabling those insights is really key for sales.
Yeah, that's great insight, and fantastic suggestion. Even for those that in marketing that are maybe don't aspire at the COO level, still having those skill sets or that knowledge. There are training sessions that you can go through, Dale Carnegie, Sandler, or just express in your own company to get that kind of training, so you understand how a salesperson operates. Is critical. I guess worst case too, there are technologies now that you can listen in on sales calls
Yeah.
regardless. So you don't even have to go through the training. You've got the information right at your fingertips. So probably a really good professional development tip that you're onto there in a big way.
Yeah, the other thing I do, and I you know, in transparency for my team, I have a shared Google Doc of OKRs. And so everybody's OKRs are there, and they can see the interdependencies between the teams, and then they can hold each other accountable because bonus is paid out on a team by team basis, right? For that 1/3 of our variable bonus. And so people are either leaning in to help build out that OKR so that the whole company feels good versus one team or the other. So I think, breaking down the silos and, to your point, leaning into other teams and learning about them and helping them really will enable you to see a bigger picture as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, amazing advice. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Look, I don't have all the answers. I'm not perfect. I'm still learning too. And so I just want to thank you guys for inviting me to talk today. And, it's interesting. We talked about a little bit about ABX, but, we're all in on it. We're changing our motion, as Megan knows. We've hired a wonderful VP of revenue marketing there at Path Factory, and but we're seeing changes in the way that the accounts are engaging in the buying committee in terms of known versus unknown, who's coming in, when, where, and what. And if you don't have those insights, you're missing out, is what I would say.
Yeah. Well, and maybe as a follow-up to this session, we can share some links back to some of the great content that you're producing.
Sure.
Because I know I want to know the answer to some of those questions, so I'm going to be reading up.
There's also some on-demand webinars that Nick, Edward, and one of our data scientists, Khalil Najif, have shared as well. So, go check it out on pathfactory.com. You'll also see the recommendations of content for you. And if you keep coming back, you'll get different recommendations just magically.
All right, I'm in. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks. Have a great day today.
Thanks, Ellen. And next week, Megan, we've got a mystery guest joining us. So we'll, stay tuned every week. Every Friday we do this at noon Eastern, 9 o'clock.